a school decides, well, we got rid of racist people and the names. Let's just bring them back. So this is a hell of a story. Put it up full mass. It gives you an idea of, what Make America Great Again can mean to some people. Schools in one Virginia county, they are now reinstating Confederate names. A school board meeting Friday morning for Shenandoah County voted to restore the names of 3 Confederate officers to schools in the district. The district appears to be the first in the country to return Confederate names to schools that had them removed after the summer of 2020. At a virtual meeting in July 2020, the summer of pandemic and protest, the board voted 5-1 to drop the names of 2 schools from Ashby Lee Elementary and Stonewall Jackson High that it deemed incompatible with a recently passed resolution condemning racism. The schools were renamed the next year as Honey Run and Mountain View. The change in Virginia was not welcome. People crowded into school board meetings denouncing the name change as secretive and rushed through. After a revote ended in a tie in 2022, the name changes stood, but opponents swore that Stonewall Jackson would be revived. And on Friday, he was. The statement from one of the board members, quote, "When you read about this man, who he was, what he stood for, his character, his loyalty, his leadership, how godly a man he was. Those standards that he had were much higher than any leadership of the school system in 2020. Mr. Tom Street said this in one of the board meetings. Then he and 5 of his colleagues voted to bring Jackson and the other names back. Jackson killed people who believed that they should be free. He was a racist. Did he believe in God? Of course he did. There are many gods. The devil is a god too, according to the text. Now, this is the first measure that has been rolled back. So the county, which is more than 90% white, okay, is not alone in rolling back decisions made in 2020 across the US. A host of measures adopted in 2020, 2021, including new classroom curriculums about the nation's racial history, may have been curtailed for or eliminated in the years since. Politicians have railed against critical race theory, and schools have reinstated mascots that have been condemned as racially offensive. But until Friday, it appears that none had brought back the actual racist people who they deemed in their own resolution as being racist people until now. Many of the signs that had been taken down from Stonewall Jackson High were kept in storage rather than discarded. That was your first sign right there, as if they were awaiting return. The 3 board members who voted in 2022 to keep the new names all decided against running for re-election the next year. Response from Black residents in the county. Black people who were among the first to integrate local schools along with their children and grandchildren described the looming vote to restore the Confederate names as a slap in the face. Several speakers emphasized that Stonewall Jackson High had been named in 1959 during Virginia's massive resistance to integration. Others emphasized the irony of beginning the meeting with a pledge of allegiance to a flag that Jackson actually waged war against. You have to remember the Confederate movement was a treasonous movement against the very flag that you stand up and pledge to. So even outside of the racial context, if for some reason that makes you uncomfortable, how about the America First context that you all like to proclaim so proudly, or the Make America Great Again context that you like to proclaim so proudly? This is the treason that was done. And you want to resurrect this. Why? Because it's a great psychological tool. It's a great psychological tool that they have utilized for decades. All right, dear brother, thoughts here.
Well, once again, like Mississippi, I'm not surprised that Virginia is racist. We have a city called Lynchburg that's right next to Blacksburg. Let's remember that. I believe these schools are in Stafford County, Virginia. The reason I know this is because I actually went to school in Fairfax County, Virginia. Even though I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., the schools outside of DC were much better. And so I found myself going to school there. And one of the things a lot of people don't know about that area is that the schools are very new and close together. And the reason they're newer than a lot of schools in surrounding states, isn't because of Virginia's vast wealth inside the Commonwealth. It's actually because all the schools were burnt down during the after Brown v. Board of Education during desegregation. They burned the schools down rather than integrate the schools. And this is why we have the movies that we do about these schools. The idea is, if you start bringing back Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee's and start bringing back these types of names for schools, then what's the next step? It gets really tricky in Virginia because it's part of the history. People forget Virginia was the capital of the South. But I wonder if you go to other institutions or other places, do they revert to the names they had in South Africa before apartheid ended? Do they revert to having Stalin University in Russia? The idea is that went against the very fabric and foundation of the United States of America. And while, by the way, kneeling, which gets so many people mad, is a protected constitutional right of protest, this specifically, Confederacy is not, because the Confederacy was not only denounced, but was found guilty of treason, the highest crime in this country. So kneeling, which is protected, is unprotected by these people, and reverting to Confederacy, which is illegal, is protected. The question isn't the names, it's what's in the name, everything.
I concur completely. And for those who are supporting this madness, saying, well, that school board has the right to vote as they choose, I want you to be reminded of something. They don't own a damn thing. They are representatives, true. But the tax dollar is what funds the operation. These are public schools.
Exactly.
That means that you're forcing people, black people and white allies and brown folk, to fund symbols of their own oppression or the oppression of folks that they love. And that is the problem, taking public tax dollars from my paycheck in order to fund a symbol of my oppression.